Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start things off by me prepping up and explaining what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off by showing you guys kind of my flatting process. This is probably going to be a 3-4 part video, I don't know. Now, first thing I'm doing here is I'm loading my channels, and basically I load the full RGB channel so that I can fill it with an inverse on black to make my line art transparent. And this right here is a filter called B-Pelt, and it allows me to, because I draw with closed lines, turn my original line art layer into my flats layer, which, as you saw, there are no, and you'll see throughout this, there are everything is seamless underneath. There's no black lines dividing any of my flats here, which is what I use to color my flat layer. Basically, I'm going through right now with the magic wand tool and selecting all the areas of Teresa's skin. I almost always start with Teresa, primarily because I have her skin near the top of my list of palette colors. And you'll also see as I go through here, picking the different colors. I start grabbing the color picker to pick things like I'll be using to pick Chris's dress and Teresa's dress, their hats and things, and pretty much all of this is fairly quick, easy, just head right on into it. And this is actually at double the speed that I was working at when I put this together. You'll also notice how I get kind of, I was kind of iffy at first. I was thinking about using either red or green to do the colors in Chris's hair for the seasons, but I went ahead and I kept it the default purple. But I'm going to go over, once we get past this, because this is the easy peasy stuff. It goes by pretty fast. It took me altogether maybe 15 minutes to do all my flatting. So I thought it was no really big deal here. It was kind of just one of those things where it's like, yep, going to fire it all up and kick it on out there. Now here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick the color for Chris and Teresa's dresses, and I actually decided to give Chris's lipstick the same tone and color as the dress, just to kind of tie things together a little bit. And I have a bad habit of wanting to pick on Teresa, and that's kind of what happened here. I've been waiting all year to do this picture, and the thought that entered my head was just role reversal, and I have that big mentality with these two characters. A lot of the times you'll find I put Teresa into this backward role, and like the marriage image that we released as wallpaper back near the middle of the year, early spring, somewhere in there. The idea was, Teresa being the tomboy, still somehow stick her in the dress because it was funny. And I know eventually I'm going to get, all kinds of yelled at for this. One of the other things that I did with this was when I came to the bells here, I wanted to go ahead and stick with some familiar territory in the colors, so I went ahead and I used the same color that I used for Chris's belt buckle. And I thought that was a good tie-in there. And two things I shy away from when I do my flats. Nothing is plain white, nothing is stark black. Unless it's meant to be specifically that way. For example, the eyes, the whites of the eyes, the frill on her dress, and the hat, I used a 10% gray. The only thing that's going to be true white is going to be the shine on Teresa's hair. I also used stark white for the shine on Chris's lip and on the highlights in their eyes, but I do that underneath where my shading goes, so that my shading actually affects the overall tone of the white highlights. Oh yes, and the snapping of the candy canes. I couldn't think of anything more fitting than to have, Chris has got her candy cane dangling out of her mouth, and Teresa's just like, oh, hell no, you are definitely going to be pissing me off now. At least that was the general idea here. Most all of this is done and can be done with a mouse. I'm just basically grabbing my magic wand tool, going to my flats layer, which is my very bottom layer, selecting the areas, and then grabbing the color that I want and filling it with the paint bucket. Very, very easy to do stuff. Like I said, very quick. This is about the only part here where I take a little bit of time with my tablet and I select the face, and at about 30% opacity I pick the color that I'm going to use for Chris's eyeshadow. In this case I actually used the same color as her lipstick because I wanted to tie things again, once again, together with the theme of the image. When we get into the actual construction of the wallpaper, things are going to go a whole lot faster. I'm going to go ahead and speed that one up a little bit quicker, but I am going to explain what I'm doing as it progresses, so that you guys can kind of get a grasp of what's going on with it and what I'm planning. Now here's the other thing. Once I paint the highlights, I had to figure out where I wanted my lighting for this. Once I've paint the highlights in the eyes, after I do the highlights on the eyes and the lip, then I go back in and I go back to my flats layer, because this is actually this is a layer that I have linked into a clipping mask so that I can't accidentally color outside my flats. I go to the flats layer and I use the colors that I've got preset for their irises to make the pupils of their eyes. I got my terminology backwards because you have their eye and then you have their pupil, and I went with a darker tone of the eye color to come up with the pupil colors. I think it gives off a better effect in the end as opposed to just going with solid black. Well, anyway, that's pretty much it, aside from just a couple of spots that I missed because the way the program is set up, it clipped over a few things and I had to go back in and basically reselect them. But I hope you guys enjoy that. It's a quick look at how I lay my flats. Next part of this, I'll be explaining. Oh, almost forgot. This is where I get into how I do all my eye shading and highlights. I'm filling this all in with the 75% gray. Basically, I control click the flats layer, and yes, I'm fixing spots as I go here. But ultimately, all of this is going to just be 75% gray, and I do this in Psy, an Easy Paint tool Psy instead of Photoshop. But this is pretty much where I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys off. We'll see you in the next video where we play with Psy.